Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, I'm going to start my cool season vegetable seeds inside. A couple weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago now, I built this stand in my dining room with some fluorescent tubes and some LED panels to do all my seed starting inside. The actual main reason I'm bringing all my seed starting inside like this, generally speaking, I have put seed in the ground for years on most things and have pretty good success. But in the fall, my fall vegetable garden, we had a hurricane and a tropical storm, and it just rained and rained and rained all fall, and it was just a total disaster. So I decided to kind of take a little more control over my seed starting and make sure that I'm doing transplants rather than seed. One of the things you need to know is your frost-free date or your average last frost date for your area, and it's pretty easy to Google that. You can just put in average last frost date or last frost date, and then your town and state or wherever you are. If I do that for my area, our average last frost date's right around mid-April. I had 2 25-degree nights the last week of April. Maybe this was 12, 14 years ago, something like that. And then we had a frost in early May, right when I started in this business. So that's just your average last day. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get frost after that. I don't like to, when I seed things, and all the years we use seed at the nursery, I'd really like to have it finished in whatever it's coming up inside and then go directly in the ground, meaning I don't want to transplant it again in the house. And so I would rather, or in a greenhouse or whatever, I want to get it in its finished form and then go directly in the ground. And then, in order to do that, I just need to count back from when I want to put it in the ground. I don't want to start tomatoes and peppers and beans and cucumbers and all the warm season things right here at the beginning of February when I can't put them in the ground until almost the end of April. Because they would come up, in this tray or whatever kind of tray you're using, and then get so big, and that's over, what is that, March, April? Yeah, I mean, it's a little over 2 months. They would get so big that I'd end up having to transplant them into bigger pots, and now all of a sudden I go from this stand that will hold 16 trays to pots everywhere, because it will just, quadruple the size of space it's taking up. So I want to just count, like I say, I want to count back from my frost, from when I want to put them in the ground, and that's when I want to start the seed. So I'm doing cool season vegetables now, right here, toward the beginning of February. I'm toward almost the middle now. And that's going to be broccoli, kale, lettuces, cabbage, if you were doing cabbage, peas, carrots. Peas and carrots just go directly in the ground. You never want to do carrots in a indoor place where you're going to transplant. You can't transplant carrots. You'll mess up the root, and then you end up with weird carrots. So put carrots directly in the ground. Peas, there's really no reason to start inside, but you can, and they're super easy to start inside. But they come up 100% in the ground or in the house most of the time. So I've got all those lettuces and spinach and that kind of thing. Typically, spinach can be hard to transplant from a tray as well, but I'm going to do it anyway. So, like I say, that's going to be broccoli, cauliflower, all those kinds of things. That's what I'm starting right now. So I'm going to get those things up, have them under the light over here. I've got a timer for these. These lights can be daisy chained together into one, and then I can use this timer. They plug into the timer plugs into the wall. I'll just have them come on 12 hours on, 12 hours off is how I'll do this. Over here in this corner, and then I use this 50 cell hard tray right here. This is what I've always used in the nursery. This is how I started seed there. This is if you've watched my propagation series, I use this tray for propagation as well. I'll link all this stuff down in the description of this video if you want to get them. You can use egg cartons. You can use old 6-packs where you just have the cells where you bought annuals the last year. You can use anything, and I've used everything in my life. I've been growing vegetables since I was a kid. I used to sell collards when I went in the fall and early winter every year in the neighborhood I grew up in when I was a kid. I've been doing this a long time, and back then I didn't have any money to do anything with, and so I have done all versions of cheap and inexpensive ways to propagate or to germinate seed and to grow, and to finish them in the ground. But I kind of fell for these 50 cell trays a long time ago because they're so rigid and I can reuse them and reuse them and reuse them. When I closed the nursery down, I probably still had 500 of these that were, 5, 6 years old. We'll get a tear. You hold them like this, and so sometimes you'll tear the end on one, and I'll just flip another one around on top of it, stick it in there, and turn 2 into 1 again, and continue to use them for years, as long as you're taking good care of them. They have holes in the bottom of them, so I'm using a solid tray underneath those, and definitely want to have some sort of solid tray for water, to keep the stuff from getting on your, all your electrical stuff. And somebody suggested on the video when I built this to just put some sort of plastic lining right on top of this, and that way there's no way to even have an accident. Whatever water gets on here will run off the side and not run onto those kinds of things. That's probably a good idea. Let me take this tray outside real quick, and I'll show you how I go about filling and what I'm using to fill the trays with. Another thing you're going to want is seed label, labels of some kind, and some sort of pen that will allow you to a marker that is waterproof to mark on the tray what you're putting them in. Especially the way I'm doing it. If you were doing them in 6-packs, you would only have one kind of thing per 6-pack. But I don't need an entire flat of one kind of lettuce, so I'm going to have like 3 rows of one and 3 rows of another. So I definitely want to have those rows labeled. So there are a lot of different choices, really, for things you can use to start your seed with. You can use those peat pellets. And if you go in a lot of stores this time of year, will have lots and lots of peat pellets, different types of peat, the pellets that swell up when you put water on them. I've always been really inconsistent with those. I end up, if I use the solid tray, and let's say I put 50 of them in this tray, and I add the water, they swell up, I put the seed in them, the seed comes up fine, and then I tend to have 10 of them that stay too wet, they get some mold on them. I'm just inconsistent with them. I'm not saying that they're bad. I'm not saying that I wouldn't be successful with them, but like I say, I tend to be inconsistent with them. I end up overwatering or underwatering something along the way, and so I just choose not to use those. This bag is actually a propagation mix, but it's going to be the same as seed starting mix. It's going to be some sort of peat with vermiculite or peat with perlite mix that's light and airy, and I use a dustpan right here to move it from the bag to the tray. That's what I've always used. It's what we used at the nursery because we didn't have machines to do it. But this works very, very effective at doing that. You can use compost as well, and some people do their transplants in compost. Again, there's probably going to be some inconsistency in compost where it's going to have the potential to keep one end of the tray wetter than the other, and so I don't use it. The other thing, when you're buying something that's labeled seed starting mix or even potting soil, anything that you intend to bring in your house, make sure that material in that bag is dry, that it's been stored dry somewhere. Get it from inside of the store if they have bags stored inside the store, because if this stuff gets wet, it's really an invitation to have fungus, gnats, and pests in it. But this is super, super dry when I get it. It's actually even hard to wet. But I'll just put 3 or 4 scoops up here, and then just spread it to the corners like this, and then we want to get it pressed down a little bit, but I actually want to end up leaving a little bit of a reservoir in each of these cells for water. So I'll just drop it several times to pack it down, and then I can go through again, and I may add just a little bit more to that. Just like that, and then I'll pack it down again, and then I'll water it out here from the top. This will be the only time I'll top water it. Just gently top water it like that. It takes a lot of water to get this mix wet initially. I don't like to wet it first because then it's sticky and makes a huge mess trying to fill the trays, but some people probably do. We can just do this a couple of times. We used to do like 10, 12 trays at the time on a cart, and then water all the whole cart at one time, and then stick all the seeds or cuttings or whatever we were doing. But I'll let that water soak in, and then I'll stick it into my solid tray and carry it in the house, and I'll show you what I do from there. So here's the tray I just did outside, and watered it extremely well. This peat-based mix won't need a whole lot of water. It'll take several days for this to dry out. The soil turns really dark when it's wet, almost black, and then when it's dry, it's kind of a gray color. You can just watch that coloration change. You can also feel it from the weight of the tray. The tray is very heavy right now. Peat holds a lot of water. You can also use coconut coir, which has become more readily available over the last few years, and it'll come in some sort of little block, which you'll wet, and it will expand into a lot of material. If you're concerned, some people are concerned that peat moss is not a renewable resource. We're mining it out of the ground, and it is definitely not a renewable resource. So if you are concerned about that, you can use, like I say, you can use the coconut coir for that. I've got all my seed packets here, with all my kale and lettuces and those kinds of things. This is the best time of year to shop for those. I don't care what it is you're going to be using, even if you're not using the seed until April or May or even June, depending on where you are. Go and get the seed now if you're buying it from a garden center or a box store or that kind of thing. It's the best selection they're going to have all year. Of course, all the seed starting catalogs are out. All the seed catalogs are out right now. This is the time of year you typically get those after Christmas. If you're not on anybody's list, this one's Johnny's Selected Seeds. I've bought seeds from them over the years. They also have some of the propagation trays and that kind of thing in the back. I don't know if this is less or more than Amazon. I'll link these things below for Amazon. On the back of your seed packet, it's always going to say full sun. That's pretty much true with that across the board on most of these things. Most of this lettuce is going to go directly into my garden out here, and I'm going to leave some netting around it, like I don't know if you saw videos from the fall, to keep the rabbits out of it. But then some of it's going to go in bowls on my front porch, and it will end up in some shade later in the spring and early summer. I can continue to extend the season a little bit with lettuce as it gets hot by shading it a little bit. Still needs some good direct light on it though. It'll tell you how many days to harvest you have on here, and the main thing here is the depth that the seed needs to go. On this kale here, this dwarf blue curled kale, it only needs to go down 1/4 inch. That's the seed barely being covered at all. I usually will use a Phillips head screwdriver for this and just poke holes right in the center. And like I say, this is barely, 1/4 inch is barely anything. And I'll just go through and poke all those holes at once, and then open the seed packet. And I put 2 seeds in each one. Ultimately, I'll thin them down to 1. You can use that, if 2 come up and you need to take 1 out, you can choose to use that one you pull out or not use that one you pull out. With seed, it's so, really is kind of very inexpensive compared to buying transplants. If I bought this tray of transplants, they would probably end up costing me 50 cents a cell. That's how much it would cost at a store, maybe more than 50 cents. I think one time I did the math on it, it was close to 60 cents, even in the box stores for transplants now. So these seeds, that seed packet has several hundred seeds in it, even that tiny little seed packet. So even with the soil, the tray's reusable, I'm going to be less than 10 cents, probably more like 5 cents per cell, soil and all, doing this. But I'll just drop 2 seeds in one of those holes and then lightly cover it, barely cover it. On something that says 1/4 inch, it just barely gets covered. And repeat that process for all 50 and just tamp them down lightly on the top. So I've gotten 2 trays done. I'll probably end up with about 8 trays of things that I'm doing right now, which is, like I say, is going to be lettuce and kale and broccoli and cauliflower. That's actually what I'm starting in here right now. And I'll save the peas and the carrots to sow directly. And all of these things will go in the ground right at the beginning of March. As soon as they'll hold that seed, as soon as they'll hold that cell together, meaning that they're up and they're rooted in enough that I can pull I can tug it out of there without doing damage to the roots. As soon as that happens, they're going in the ground. And then I'll start all of my, I've already got all my tomato seeds, flower seeds, beans, cucumbers, zucchini, squash, all of those things. It's a long time before we can put that stuff in the ground, so I will wait till the first week of March to do those from seed. Some people will start peppers about this time and go ahead and go through a transplant process on those in the house. If you were going to choose to do one super early, it would be peppers probably, because they take longer to have pickable fruit on them. As a comparison, let's see, let me find a pepper here. This California Wonder sweet pepper is going to take 85 days versus these lima beans here, which are only going to take 65 days. So there is a little bit, it might be worth your time to grow a slightly larger transplant going in the ground. You can quickly and easily Google when is it time to plant vegetables in my area? Like if I say, when is it time to plant vegetables in central North Carolina, where I'm at? Quickly, you're going to get a lots of different resources for when it is time to, when your frost-free date is, when you should be doing seed versus transplants. Like if you just want to go to a store and buy the transplant, you know, the seedlings already germinated to put directly in the ground, that would be called a transplant. It'll tell you when the transplants go in the ground or when you need to be thinking about starting seed. So that would be a resource that you're going to need to use wherever you live. But right now, again, it's cool season vegetable seed for me. I'm a month away from the summertime vegetable seed starting. So thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. There'll be lots of videos on this process of how I'm using these lights. And once these cool season vegetables are in the ground, and then we do the summer vegetables in here, and then these go away, then I'm going to actually grow food directly on here and continue to use them all summer long. I'll grow microgreens and lettuces and things like that inside here. And so I'll show you how I'll do all that as well. So again, thanks for watching.